I'm very excited to launch our first keynote panel of the day. The topic for discussion will be driving digital transformation through strategic HR. And it is my distinct honor to introduce our moderator for the panel, Sumiasanto Sen, HR technology, transformation, and people analytics leader and advisor. He's also the author of Digital HR Strategy. Mr. Sen ranks among the top global influencers in HR technology, transformation, and analytics. He's the founder and future of work strategist of the HR advisory firm Peoplecentric, based in Frankfurt, Germany, and is the author of Digital HR Strategy, Achieving Sustainable Transformation in a Digital Age. I will turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Sumiasanto.
Thank you, Chuck, and welcome everyone to the panel Driving Digital Transformation Through Strategic HR. And we have a wonderful panelist today. We have Oti Vogt, the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Transformation Officer for ING. We have Salvatore Mello from Seattle, who is a Senior Director for Global HR Strategy, Microsoft.
Honored.
And we have Rafael Pintres, who is a VP, Vice President People for ZTech for the strategic venture for Anheuser, who's in there. He's based in New York. Welcome everyone, and looking forward for a nice discussion on a very interesting topic, digital transformation. So one side, I have seen most of the companies either somehow transforming themselves, and digital transformation is definitely one of the hot topic today. On the other hand, we also see most of the 70% of the company fails in their digital transformation efforts. So definitely people like to know what are the major reasons for that. And it has been also noticed people-centric approaches in digital transformation is getting vital nowadays, right? Especially thinking on the perspective of the changing the culture, the mindset, the behaviors of the people and how it impact. So going back to Oti, directly to you, especially when ING has transformed themselves to agile organizations recently, right? So how you think your organizations and your leader manage this change in terms of the change in the mindset, behaviors of culture, how difficult it was, and can you share the story?
Wonderful. So first and foremost, thank you very much. Thank you, Chuck, and great to meet Salvador and Rafael. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I think it's also a very important topic in these times full of challenges and pressures. And I think for the HR function, a brilliant opportunity to raise to the challenge and actually help us with transforming our organizations for the better. I'm kind of hoping this will be the decade of HR, because I feel we had our toes in the water in many of these topics for a long time, but this is probably the right moment to truly pull through. Now, if I look at it from an ING perspective, I think what I see is a number of phases. There was a first phase where we started with the implementation of Agile, primarily in the IT domain and primarily in our home country, which is very much the Netherlands. From there, we took it internationally across all of the countries that we operate in, and we also took it into the other functions, both kind of service and sales and support functions. And I think one, as you suggest there, Agile is a product management methodology at its very heart, and certainly an enabler in dealing with the necessity to be more adaptive and to digitize faster in order to kind of react to the increasing requirements of our customers. But the big challenges in actually achieving organizational learning at scale very often have very little to do with technology or with the structures or with the processes. It very often comes to, are people trusting each other? Because if you think about it, very often being innovative means being risky, means being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and challenging what is the norm. And that is a deeply political act, so to speak, right? Especially in a more traditional organization. So I think what we have experienced, and here kind of opening up to Rafael and Salvador, is very often that it wasn't easy to install the basics in regards to the roles and the structures and the procedures and the rituals and so on. But the real work starts then in regards to changing the overarching atmosphere and mindset, and I think also very importantly, leadership. What people often don't realize is that leadership in an agile or adaptive kind of organization becomes more difficult and hence very often requires the education and learning of the leaders so that they're able to hold that space for continuous evolution and innovation.
Yeah, that's a very good experience to share. Like you bring the two vital point. One is definitely leadership. Another one is like it's difficult part in changing people. But I think it's a journey. Like I think everyone will agree with. It's a journey. Like it's something we have to start with, something we will challenge, something we will face difficulty. And you bring another interesting point of like innovation in this business point. And this point, I'm directly going to Salvador. Like Microsoft is one of the top 5 innovative company, and I'm sure like Microsoft has also have gone through this transformation into building up this innovation culture within the people. And how do you think, like, does it make sense, like in terms of like people-centric transformation for Microsoft, or you have a different approach?
No, it is. I totally agree. It is people-centric. So let me start. First of all, thank you, Chuck and Sunia, for organizing this event and for this wonderful opportunity. I fully agree with Oti that HR has never been in the spotlight as much as it is today. Digital transformation and the use of technology in HR is here to stay and will only become more sophisticated and more ingrained in organizations. But the first thing to understand about it is it's a double-edged sword in the sense that there has never been so much that we can ask about people and so much we can ask from people. But this can also become a burden on the workforce. Let me give you just one example. There's many, but one example is the surveys. The surveys that we have used for many decades now. They used to be once a year, right? The annual engagement survey or climate survey. Today, at least at Microsoft, we have surveys about engagement and climate-related topics every single day. So it's almost in real time. So every day we survey people. Now, that is possible to a large extent because of technology and because of our ability to process data and to derive insights and to keep track of many things almost in real time. But if you think about it from the employee experience viewpoint, then it can also become a boring experience if you are surveyed day after day after day after day. And if the survey is more than a few questions long, then you can start to encounter fatigue, survey fatigue. So you have to be careful. It's a balancing act. And what we have done is instead of asking these questions from people for the entire workforce, we have selected just a few thousand employees every day, and they're randomly selected so that every individual only gets surveyed maybe once a month or so. And that allows us to keep track of all of these metrics without producing survey fatigue. And the same is true for many other technologies. So I think that one of the key things to remember is to not just roll out a piece of technology in the abstract or in the absence of knowing how it is going to be received by employees, but to make it part of the equation. So that returns to your first question. Yes, it is very much a people-driven, people-centered transformation. And I can go on and talk a lot about how the Microsoft culture has changed. But I will give the microphone back to you and then return to that topic if you want later on.
Absolutely understand the point of view what you're mentioning here, and like we all agree, like HR plays a very vital role here in changing, because if the transformation is people-centric and the people are the core in transforming any organizations or maybe digital transformation, I think HR definitely plays a very important role here, right? And that's why like the strategic HR, like how the HR strategy, people strategy comes to the business strategy and transform themselves is vital. But I have also experienced, like myself, and also like heard from a lot of other leaders, non-HR leaders, like HR is very much process-centric. HR are not focusing on the consumer when you mention about employee experience. So is that true? Like, what's your experience, Rafael, like being a chief people officer in your ZTech or new company. So what do you think? Like, what's your opinion here? Like, do you agree with that, or do you have other point?
It's a great point. So first of all, thanks all the participants and my fellow panelists here. So great cohort of people, great minds to discuss about HR and transformation. But Soumya, to your point, yes, definitely. I think I agree with Odi and Salvador on the terms of how we are pretty much in the center of everything that is happening at the world right now. And we have never been more strategic than anything else in terms of the organizational strategy overall. I will highlight a couple of things in a context before going to talk about people-centric. But basically, the world before was very siloed on industries, right? Retail, consumer goods, manufacturing. Today, the world is completely different. Today, we have basically three main clusters. We have new tech, that is startups, VCs, hypergrowth. We have big tech, and we have the traditional companies, right? What is common across these three clusters? Basically, is the two clusters on tech are great disruptors and is forcing all the other companies to progress and evolve, right? So we are, AB InBev, we are in that cluster, right? So the way we've been doing this is basically setting up the entire organization through the strategy. So connecting technology and innovation in the entire strategy of the company. So today, if we look at the five main pretty much focus or priorities of the company, all are connected to technology and to innovation. But we are a beer company, right? So yes, but I would say today we are a tech company that really produce the best beers and sell the best beers. But how you transform and how you make this transformation in terms of innovation, it's creating this mindset of innovation by pretty much empowering people with the customer centricity mindset, right? So basically, we serve 6 million points of sales on a weekly basis. It's a very granular customer base, right? So in order for the company to grow, we need to make sure that these businesses, they grow also, right? So ZTech plays the role on really supporting the small and medium businesses with technology. That's what we do. We do technology, right? So that's my role, is to set up an entire organization and an entire structure to really build technology, right? But we are, again, part of a beer company. So I think it's this type of innovation within the traditional companies, it's what is leapfrogging, and it's what is putting the companies in a different path, right? So today we work with clean energy. So we have companies that works on clean energy and distribute energy. We have fintechs. We have marketplace that pretty much sells meat, groceries, everything you can imagine, and we sell beer. So everything part of the same organization. So you need, and the companies needs to understand that we need new capabilities, we need new skill sets, and HR needs to be the center of orchestrating this entire transformation, right? So I think that's the mindset we've been pretty much running in the past, I would say 4 years. I think we're in a much better position right now to face the current circumstances of COVID and responding to that transformation on a faster pace.
That's a great share, like HR being a catalyst for transformation, and helping the organizations to achieve all those part, whether it's capabilities, whether it's changing the mindset of the people, leadership skills and coaching. So I think there are a lot of things where HR is really getting into. And on this note, we have a time for the poll. James, like if you are here, like please activate the poll, and then the audience can poll it right now. So what you can do, you can directly go to the link which is provided in the screen to the Mentimeter, and you can directly give your participate in the poll. Otherwise, you can also scan the QR code, which is also shown in the screen, and you can also participate in the poll. And we will be discussed soon once we have this the answers or the feedback, what you will receive in the poll. In the meanwhile, I will ask to the Salvador, you have extensive experience also in the people analytics field, right? And people analytics, from my experience, being also in the people analytics, I see a lot of organizations, people analytics is becoming a center of the core of HR, not only to the HR, but also the business, especially in terms of transforming also changes and definitely managing the talent. So what's your experience, like how Microsoft is using people analytics to influence these changes, transformation, and other part?
Well, one example is what I've already mentioned, which is to understand employee sentiment in real time and how that is evolving. I think that's one of the key areas in which analytics can be exploited. But there's, Microsoft, given its technology background and how sophisticated its internal systems are, is quite advanced in this field, and we're doing things such as natural language processing, and of course using machine learning to derive insights and so on. So the main difficulty with analytics in general, people analytics, is to get HR used to posing the right questions, and then especially to interpret the data. Let me use an analogy, which is completely outside of HR, but I think is simple enough that everyone will see how it applies. Perhaps the most democratic data set that we have ever had as humankind is the data set that is in the sky above us at night, all the stars and planets and the moon and the sun. They move around us in different patterns, and ever since prehistory, we have all been exposed to these patterns and have all been able to see these movements. But how do we interpret those movements is really what provides the insights. Because in the past, until 600 years ago, everyone interpreted these movements in exactly the wrong way. And even though it was possible to even predict things such as solar eclipses, because the movements were traced very, very accurately, the interpretation was wrong, and therefore the insight was also wrong. It took, this is why I love this example, because it took the creativity of Copernicus, to reinterpret and find the correct insight behind these patterns, which was, of course, that they were not all revolving around the Earth, but the Earth was one of the many heavenly bodies that was revolving around the sun. And only the moon, of all of these objects, only the moon was the one that was revolving around the Earth. So that is an example of what it means to interpret information. And when it comes to analytics, and workforce analytics in particular, very, very often you find this naive assumption that if you could just have the data at hand, if someone would just give you the data, that the answer would be obvious, and you could reach the correct interpretation immediately. And that's not true. Very often you encounter things that, even if you see a simple bar chart or something, it is misleading, because there's a lot of ways to interpret certain results that come from workforce data, and that is extremely important. So it's not so much that we have to rush and implement all sorts of sophisticated algorithms to process the data and do number crunching. That's important, but it's not the number one ingredient. The number one ingredient is developing a data literacy within HR, so that we know what to do with the data and we know what questions we can ask from the data.
That's true. That's very true. That's my experience as well. So there is a gap. Like if you see like the analytics function used in other business compared to HR is a gap. And I think it's definitely coming up well if you see last 6-7 years. But I think there's still a lot of need to have more maturity here. And you were right here. And that's definitely a good experience you share. We are ready with the poll answer. Like James, if you can share, what are the answers coming? Yeah, so we have like three question, like three statement, like HR has a significant impact on the digital transformation, and that's what like the most of the people are saying, and on that part. And we have two other options, like if you feel prepared to guide your people through digital transformation. On the third option is like HR is transforming itself at the same rate as organization. And that's the experience, like you can see, like definitely HR has a significant impact, which we already discussed with the panel. and HR itself also transforming a lot. Like that's also you can see that the number of people, our audience participations here also say like HR itself transforming, and that's the key part. Like if HR don't transform themselves, it's very difficult also to transform and act on those parts when you really help the business to transform, right? So that's one of the interesting part. Like any other thought like you want to share, any of you, and what's your experience like based on the audience poll?
Can I make, Raphael, you get ready. You want to go first? I got a provocation that I'm happy to share.
I would probably talk a little bit about the HR transformation, the HR for HR, or HR organization as a transformation. So since the business is evolving, the HR organization needs to be in the same exact pace, right? So I think we, like you said, in the connection of data, in all the new capabilities and enablers that it's on our hands to control and to use for the benefit of the growth of the organization. So the skill sets and it also needs to be within the HR organization. So a couple of things that Odie mentioned about agile and methodology. So something that came from the tech world, it's now part of the reality of the HR organization. So currently working with squads and diverse squads to solve customer pain points, it's what we do. So our internal customers, our teams, our other business functions that we support, right? So that type of mindset needs to be within the HR organization, right? So one of the things I've did is really to change substantially the skill sets of my team. So all my direct reports, for example, they came from the tech industry. They were HR from tech, right? So we made that change. We've designed and tailored the HR organization to set up them to be the future of our HR leadership and organization.
Yeah.
Wonderful point. And if I can build on Raphael, and I'm looking a bit at Chuck here, I guess I need to make sure I still get invited to these panels in the future. So, but I want to make one provocation, which is, and with all due respect, not being an HR professional, I really believe the hour has also come to rename HR, because frankly, human resources and this whole idea that we treat human beings as resources is anachronistic at its very best. And it also doesn't reflect the true value, as Raphael is just saying, that the HR community brings to the table. Right, so I would suggest maybe there's a case for a global renaming competition on HR, which of course Chuck will be unhappy with because HRD then doesn't work. But I want to make a second point, because as I said, when we started to kind of also transform the support function, so including HR and finance. Now, I'm always trying to say, yes, that might also mean that HR needs to become closer to data and technology and organize in a more agile fashion. But that is not really what it is all about. I think what it also means is that HR and finance in particular must review all of their support processes and readapt them to an adaptive, continuous learning, agile enterprise. For example, performance management, right? We have known for decades that traditional performance management methods do not work. Go to any research from any university that you like, and you will find that incentives with sticks and carrots are not really supportive of human motivation, right? I think when focus on individual high performance and talent management, we need to take into account that in an agile enterprise, as Raphael is saying, the base entity is very often the team, not the individual. How do we cater for that? Leadership development. Again, we need to ensure that we are building servant leaders, leaders who are able to let go of control, because if we continue to define ourselves, our success as going up the ladder from VP to SVP to EVP, guess what? Hierarchy prevails and self-organization around us doesn't flourish. So it requires a different type of leadership, right? So I would say, yes, technology is important, but it's an enabler. And I think also at a corporate level, we need to make sure we must use technology, but we must make sure that at the same time, we've got the moral agency, we've got the humanistic, people-centric values to ensure that, so to speak, the economy remains at the service of humanity and not the other way around. So we need an adaptive evolutionary process that is embedded in the organization, but also one that ensures people flourish and want to contribute and give their best ideas to really innovate. A little provocation, Sonia, for you.
I
So
always get provoked on this part.
I'm all about changing the name of human resources. I do think that's obsolete. I'm all for human capital, which has been used many times in the past, and I think is much more descriptive of the current world. But I'll let it go at that.
So I manage
A lot
people.
of
I don't do human resources. I do people.
I think a lot of organizations already changed their name, right? So like people operations, people experience, people and culture. Like I think this is already becoming a trend. Like organizations follow. Actually, a lot of the organizations coming up. So name is changing, but my point of view is what's in the name. I think we have to change from the inner side. Until other than this, nothing will happen. Only changing the name doesn't going to change or really change anything. I think we have to understand why this change is important from the inner side. And on that point, I just want to bring also some questions from audience. And one of the questions is also to the OT and Rafael, like on the innovation piece, like when you sharing your experience, like how do your organizations gather the innovative ideas from your workforce? So do you use any methods or any process to get those ideas from your new people?
Rafael, do you want to go first? I'm sure you have something.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Maybe just a quick observation. I think, so one, you need to create an environment where people want to bring their ideas. Otherwise, any collection of those ideas is not going to be very fruitful. Secondly, as Rafael said, I really believe that this cross-functional fertilization is really important in that, because very often if teams come together from different functions, that sharing is a lot more powerful and also a lot richer. What we do is through the agile methods, for example, retrospectives or the stand-ups or the ritualization of generation of ideas. That is one element which is very fruitful. Secondly, we use formats like hackathons, where we bring people together across domain, even with outsiders, to create thinking on specific ideas. And then, of course, and I think it came through earlier when I think Salvador or Rafael talked about different businesses. Rafael, I think you mentioned different businesses, which I think also opens that question of ambidextrous organization. How do you explore the new and exploit the existing? How do you work with fintechs, with the partner ecosystem? How do you bring new ideas from outside the organization into it? And I think here, again, lots of very interesting approaches, portfolio of different projects or partnerships, joint ventures, internal kind of spin-offs and so on. So very interesting formats. And I think we are experimenting with almost everything. And again, I would suggest the most important is create an environment where people want to contribute and where support for them to experiment. Rafael, does that ring true for you?
Very, very true, Odi. I agree. I think the environment is extremely important to enable innovation. One of the things that we do, and I strongly believe it's a great method, is try to build things backwards. So basically, from the customer perspective, and bring to building solutions and eventually strategies. So I think that first you're assertive. Then you create an environment that it's multidisciplinary, so you bring people together from multiple verticals and pretty much expertise to discuss problem, to discuss issues, to discuss opportunities, and how to address it, right? But basically in a backward type of approach, using methodology and using agile. If you fail fast. And so that's the mindset we create within our organization. One thing that you mentioned, Odi, that is extremely relevant is something that I love to do is really to build organizations and build the strategies. And I think with what we've been doing in our strategy at AB InBev is really to build those, what I call agencies, right? So outside the core business, to give more freedom, to give more pace, to establish a different line of culture for more faster or hyper growth type of businesses, such as fintech, like Odi mentioned, and marketplace and other verticals that are not directly our core business, but are biggest enablers for the future, right? So how do you balance having the protection of the core, but also enabling mechanisms and cultures and organizations within the mothership to prepare the future, right? So I think that is something that I really love in the strategy, in how to push the organization further in terms of this mindset and ecosystem of innovation.
That's true. That's so true, and that's also not easy. Like what you mentioned, like it needs a lot of effort, and also like you have to little bit patience. I think what I experienced, like some of those organizations face challenge when it really try to do a little bit faster. But on the other hand, the uncertainty time also demand to experiment something very fast, so that you can learn from your failure. We have also a question for Salvador. Is with the data, because you started this conversation, interesting conversation there, like data is everywhere. How can you best translate what this data really means? What role does it have in wider strategy setting?
Yes, well, it's a dialogue that has to take place. Data doesn't provide insights just one way. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. So the key is to have a conversation and to get it started if it hasn't started yet. Many people naively think that perhaps if we only had a few dashboards circulated, to all the HR leadership team, then things would magically solve themselves and people would have insights. And that's just not true. There's different business lines that have different problems. The problems within a single business line change over time. Sometimes you're facing a growth situation. Sometimes you're facing a downsizing. Sometimes you're trying to get into a new market or produce or send a new product into the market. All of these situations change over time, and the questions, the business questions, are going to change with those situations. So HR has to be part of that business dialogue, and then translate that into data-related questions that can be answered, rather than trying to get the people analytics team to provide those answers out of context. Because if you try to provide answers out of context, it's just impossible. There's just too many possible questions that might be of interest, and guess what? Usually they will not be of interest to that particular company in that particular time. So you have to insert yourselves into that conversation.
That's true. That's true. I have a very short statement on the strategy. Somebody asking, measures what matters. I believe in that. If you start with that, what makes sense for your business, start doing that. You don't need every data, all single data points to capture. You really have to find what's challenges you want to solve with the data. I think that's a very important point. And on that note, I'm coming back to Oti, your leadership discussion about the leaderships and the leaders changing leader. Why the organizations and other people thinking when in times of uncertainty, especially when in respect to thriving of organizations, why leadership fail? And you bring leadership need to change, right? So we have heard about servant leadership maybe, right, which is coming up. So why leadership fail in times of uncertainty? What's your experience?
Now, it's again a brilliant question, and I'm not sure I got a very good answer. I'm always saying when I was young, I had all the answers. Now I'm old, I got all the questions. But I think one thing, I'm looking at myself, and I think with a little bit of gray hair, I found out that very often I'm the biggest obstacle to innovation happening around me. Why? Because we as leaders have often been trained to control. Right? We have been conditioned to always have the answer, be the brightest person in the room, be the person who has the corner office and always wants to succeed. So embracing failure, letting go, taking time for reflection, becoming vulnerable in creating, putting equal emphasis on relationships, which is important in a business where you want trust as on the outcomes and results. It takes some real self-reflection and self-work. And I'm always saying, I have personally experienced, and I'm collecting examples of similar stories where organizational transformation ultimately is only possible through concurrent individual transformation. The consciousness and the maturity of an organization can never transcend the consciousness and maturity of its leaders. And I think, therefore, when you say, what do leaders need to do in order to enable this transformation? And I include the HR function in that. I think we really, like you said earlier, we have to start with ourselves. Our inner life is our outer life, and we can only go far into the we if we fully inhabit the I, as Frederic Laloux once suggested. So I think it has to start with ourselves, which is funny because we started from technology and data. And I think we're always coming back to the point, actually, organizations don't change, people do. And by the way, we have to start that journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's an all valid point. So technology is always there, but I think if we don't think from the starting point for ourselves, start with individual, then think about your team, think for more like a family, and think about your organization first before adopting to the technology. And we have a very interesting question. I think maybe Salvador, you want to answer this. Like, if I'm a part of a small HR team with limited resource, where can I start with improving our technical literacy?
Yes, I would say that don't start by trying to become a programmer or a professional statistician. I mean, that's a background that takes years to develop. So it's probably easier to hire an analyst straight out of school who is a good programmer and a good statistician, rather than trying to become yourself one mid-career. But there are some good resources that will at least allow you to understand what sort of questions you can ask from the data and what sort of things these new technologies can actually do. So for example, there's a very good book that was published last year called How Smart Machines Think. And this was published by a Google engineer, even though the Microsoft Chief Technology Officer wrote the foreword because they used to work together in the past. And it describes self-driving cars and other, how computers teach themselves to play and win video games and things that at first glance you might say, hey, what does this have to do with HR? And it has everything to do with HR because those are the technologies that are slowly invading the HR space. And this sort of book, which is non-technical, it's full of diagrams but no programming or mathematics. It can give you a very good idea of what you can actually do with all of these new techniques. And then you hire the analysts who just learned those techniques in school, and you can tell them, okay, here's what I would like your help on.
Thank you, Salvador. Thank you for the answer. So we are talking about a lot about the people, organizations, right? So and then we are also coming to our end of our panel. One last question to Rafael. What do you think? Like, how organization can become sustainable, like more responsive, especially they are easily thrive in the crisis, pandemic, or any other changes which is coming around, which is constant, like happening now.
I think more than ever, based on what we're facing right now with COVID, speed and will be definitely something that in Agile is something that we're going to have to use to maintain our growth as an organization, as industries, and pretty much as leaders, right? So I think that mindset is extremely important for sustainability, for growth, right? I think a couple of things is normally when we're talking about COVID is what is going to change in terms of, remote work and this type of things. My point in my substantial question today is how we're going to address the customer needs and transformation of the consumers and relationships, and how we address those things. And not if we're going to be remote or non-remote. Probably the truth is going to be in between. But the fundamental question now for sustainability is how we are ready to take over a new world that is going to be faster, that is going to be more digital, that people will interact more and more at a faster pace. So I think that's a fundamental question. That's what we all need to think about to put ourselves in and pave the road for the future.
Very good view, and I really like it. And we are also coming to the end of our panel, and really thank you for all your experience and your views shared with the audience. And I am sure like a lot of learnings has happened with this panel. Like we really brings a really interesting topic of discussion. Back to you, Chuck, now.